What's up everyone? Welcome to the channel and thanks so much for tuning in to what's going to be a review, swatches, and a couple of short little tutorials using the Natasha Denona Retro Palette. So let's go ahead and dive in. So the Retro Palette, although it is almost entirely cool purples, plums, and a few cool taupes, is actually based on the Mini Retro Palette, which kind of has some olivey shades in it. So it's an interesting extension to that 5-pan palette. It's what's considered a midi-sized palette, so it's not the 5-pan mini, and yet it's also not something as large as, for example, here is the Circo Loco palette. The midi palettes are smaller, as well as the shadow sizes, just as a size comparison. Because when I first heard midi palette, I was like, that was a new one for me. And like all of her more recent palettes in the harder plastic magnetized packaging, there are holes in the backs that you can pop out the individual pans, rearrange them, mix and match them across palettes as you have them, or you can take a magnet. This is something I have from that, remember that e.l.f. magnetic mask that I don't think I ever used after the video that I made about it? This is the most useful thing I have for picking up shadows from these palettes. But any magnet will really do. This palette has 4 different textures in it, a bunch of matte shades, a few metallic shades, 1 duochrome shade, and then a sparkly topper shade. And normally I come to the Natasha Denona palette party for the unique, sparkly, multichromatic shades that really make her palette stand out, but I have to say, I am staying at this party because of the matte shades. There are actually 2 different matte formulas in this palette, and then I went back to a couple of her other more recent palettes and noticed that she's been incorporating them more there as well. Basically, one is like your traditional matte shadow shade. It's like a pressed powder, it's a harder press, it just feels like a pressed powder formula. Still beautiful, buttery, like not chalky, not skipping at all. But then there's another one that she actually calls a cream powder formula, and that is exactly what it feels like. It's almost like a soft mousse, almost like the ColourPop, you know, Super Shock shadow texture. It's kind of bouncy in a way. But unlike a Super Shock shadow where it might be harder to take a fluffy brush like this and really work it through the crease or diffuse it, at least I find, these are super conducive to blending and building and being super beautiful and pigmented. It's a really interesting, beautiful hybrid formula. I really, really like it. And I guess I'm going on about it because it's just not something I was expecting from her formula repertoire in this palette. But then come to find out when I went back to, that's actually why I have the Circo Loco palette out, there are a few of those cream powder like this Fun to Mime, the powder blue right here, that is one of those cream powder formulas. So all of the formulas in here are beautiful, I think, but those are the ones that really took me by surprise. So if you're into great matte shadows, she nails them in here. Overall, I'm pretty pleased with the shadow variety in here in terms of both texture and shades. There's a nice color spectrum, or a nice shade spectrum, I should say, all the way from Mod, which is this lightest matte cream up here, to the deepest, which for neutral/browns is this Opart right here, or this deep crimson or kind of eggplant shade Rebellion down here in the bottom. It doesn't get as deep. I maybe would have liked to see one shade that was like ultra dark, like not quite a matte black, but something a little closer to that. I find that both of those shades I just pointed out fall a little short of that, and so when it came time to like doing a super smoky lash line or really deepening an outer corner, using those 2 shades kind of fell short. In fact, this shade Rebellion, although it looks very deep in the pan, I did a cut crease with that, and it actually came out much brighter than I was anticipating. And granted, I could have layered it with Opart to make it a little bit deeper, but I wanted to keep that pigment just as it was without mixing it with other shades. And so because of that, I found that it came off quite bright as I was doing it, which by the way, to do that look, as well as the one that I am doing here today, you'll see me using a tool. It's my crease piece. Side note, I recently ordered the newest iteration of this. I have a review where I did it with, they were stickers where this shape right here comes off and you would put it on the front of the wand. But I found that it was lifting on either side, and it just made for like kind of a more challenging crease drawing experience. You know, it was better than freehanding, but it wasn't a perfect process. They've redone it now to where there's a little pocket. There's a pocket in each of these things, and it actually slips on to this wand. So you don't have to worry about the edges popping up and kind of you having to move it and maybe risk some of that precision that you're looking for in using a tool like this with your crease. So FYI, if you missed out on the first round of the crease piece, don't worry, they're back, and in my opinion, better than ever. I used the winged crease for both this look and the other one that you'll see, where it was super simple. I just used Rebellion in the crease and the duochrome, the one duochrome shade in this palette, which is Glitz, up here in the corner. But aside from wanting like one shade that went a little bit deeper in this palette, I'm not mad at everything else. I don't find there are a whole lot of duplicate shades in here. Like sometimes a palette with this many shadows, sometimes they're like, okay, yes, they look different in the pan, but when you actually go to use them, they look identical. Could we not have gotten a little bit something different, maybe more contrast? There is no shadow that I really feel that way about in here. All of them really go together well, and they add a little something different to this palette. Not much to complain about with this palette. It's really beautiful if you're into Natasha Denona, if you're into the idea of a plum-based, cool taupe palette, which is kind of unique from her. She's done colorful palettes, but I feel like she's done a lot of warm palettes, and so if you're looking for something both cool and colorful, this is a nice way to go for Natasha Denona. I will say though, very similar to the Naked 3 palette. I don't know, obviously there are some unique shades and textures in here. It's not the overwhelming majority of shades in this palette though. You have your one duochrome, your one sparkly topper, and the rest are, metallics and mattes, and although they are very pretty finishes, not necessarily shades or finishes that you can't get from other, maybe more affordable brands, like an Urban Decay Naked 3 palette. Although I will say, Naked 3 cannot touch any of these deeper shades right here. That's one thing that I found the Naked 3 really lacked was, again, shades in those deeper spectrums to just really make a dramatic smoky eye. It stayed very kind of mid-tone, neutral, softer, which is not bad if that's what you're looking for, but I'm looking for range in my palettes. And so although this is a very similar color story, I mean, down to the fact that you have cool, shimmery taupes mixed in with your soft, romantic pinks and plums, there is a better shade range overall, in my opinion, with this palette. But is it a totally unique color selection? No, probably not. If you have a large makeup collection already, you can probably find most of these shadows in there to kind of piecemeal your way to something similar to this palette. But if it's a palette you're interested in, like it really appeals to you, you're looking to add something like this to your collection, it's a nice one. It's a really nice one. I have no complaints. It's pretty beautiful. So that is it. Those are my thoughts on the Retro Palette from Natasha Denona. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video and seeing those quick little tutorials. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. And thank you guys so much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye guys.